The amount of references in this episode of Spy Family is comedy freaking gold. Like, okay, let's just get the easy ones out of the way. There was a legitimate, like, Dragon Ball Z reference. Like, we had our characters like Damien go to Namek. Like, legitimately, the background shifts to Namek from Dragon Ball Z, and then you see a death ball coming at him, which aka is Frieza's signature killing move, going at Damien, and I'm just like, am I really watching the same show? Like, am I watching Spy Family or am I watching Dragon Ball Z? Because that reference alone just killed me. Like, I was dying at that moment. But then there was a scene later on in the episode where you get to see, Damien jump in front of Anya and take the ball, and he holds it, and then, the ball lets go, he falls down. And that entire sequence of events, FYI, if you didn't catch it, was definitely the iconic scene where Piccolo jumps in front of Nappa's ki blast, takes the blast to protect Gohan. It's literally scene by scene. There's some slight differences, but overall, it's basically the exact same scene. And I think it's very telling, honestly, we get a scene like this when the Dragon Ball superhero movie that just came out in Japan, we have this episode come out. So I'm just like, yeah, it kind of all lines up together. Maybe they're wanting to get their Dragon Ball Z references out of their system because of, the new Dragon Ball movie that literally just released in Japan. So it's just great. I love this episode. There's so many good references, so many good moments, and, it's not even just the laughs and comedy as well. There actually is some really good character development on display while watching this episode, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But there's another reference in particular that stood out to me, and that was the scene towards the end of the episode where Anya initiates her killer move, and it's called, Star, Comet or whatever, and she attacks, her opponent. And that entire sequence, the entire art style shifted. And it's clear that it's a reference. 100%, it's clear it's a reference. And as soon as I saw that scene, instantly in my mind, two things popped in my head. Either A, it was a Studio Trigger reference, iconic for making stuff like Kill la Kill, and, making stuff like, famous, quirky, weird series like, Little Witch Academia, stuff like that. And then another thought, and I was like, this also looks like No Game, No Life. And here, I want to show a picture on screen, okay? If you look at No Game, No Life, and you look at just the way its art is, look at the line work of, No Game, No Life. You'll see literally the line work is red in color, and it's very distinct, because normally when you look at anime, and especially with its line work, it's black. And so when you see, No Game, No Life, it sticks out. And then that entire sequence with Anya towards the end of the episode, the line work is straight up red. So when I look at that, I was just like, there is definitely some form of reference here, and I'm more inclined to believe that it is No Game, No Life than anything else, because if you know the concept of No Game, No Life, it's about, games, winning games, etc., and this is literally just a dodgeball match episode, so it kind of fits in line with that very theme. And also, there was some Hunter x Hunter vibes as well throughout this episode too, because it's a dodgeball match, and if you haven't watched Hunter x Hunter or read the manga, well, there is a dodgeball little mini segment in an arc, and it's pretty freaking great. Easily one of the best dodgeball matches I've ever seen in a manga. But enough with the references, so let's talk about, what this episode had in it. The character development, the characterization, what was going on with Anya, what was going on with Damien. There was a lot of good stuff throughout this episode. So first, let's talk about Damien, because this episode begins with him. It begins with Damien and his overall eternal struggle, what he's dealing with in his personal life, and it's not straight up told to you in this episode, but it's clear as day that he is going through a lot. And so basically, a few episodes back, when everybody got a classroom picture, we saw everybody near their parents, and I pointed out in my episode review that Damien was the only one that was in the picture that didn't have his parents there. His father wasn't there, etc. And we know the main target that, Lloyd is going after is Damien's father. But you could see that Damien's father is very distant. He's not someone that is probably proactive in Damien's life on a constant. And you could just see that by the way he carries himself throughout this episode of Spy Family. And especially when the episode begins with him looking at the picture and he notices he's by himself and you see everybody with people. And then as soon as that happens, you see where, Damien's friends start talking about his brother, and it's like, oh, your brother's so special, he's so powerful, he has already a cell at this age, basically hyping up Damien's brother, and then in that moment, you could see that Damien has some inner conflict, that he feels inferior, he feels like he is not living up to the standards that his family wants, and so he feels like a failure, which is probably why his father isn't taking notice in him. You can get all of this from that brief little moment at the beginning of this episode, and I find it very interesting that we don't actually get to see Damien's brother, and if, Damien's father was there in the first place. Like, we don't even know if Damien's father was actively in Damien's brother's life, and if that is the case, you could just see the correlation of just how Damien is being mistreated, or not really. He's an outcast, basically, in his family. That's at least the impression you get. So it's a really nice way to start off the episode, because that kind of sets up the main motivation for what Damien is trying to fight for in the dodgeball match. Even though in the grand scheme of things, none of them got a Stella or a Tantris Bolt, it still doesn't change the fact, though, that was kind of the main goal and why Damien is trying to do so well in this school. He wants to be acknowledged by his parents, and I think it's a really nice contrast as well, because when we look at Anya and then we look at Damien, there is a discrepancy between both of them. Obviously, Anya, she is someone that was adopted, but at the same time, she is being treated very well for, adopted child. She's loved and getting the proper treatment she needs at home. You have Yor and Lloyd both, being great parents towards her. While Damien as well, he has been born into his family. He has a very rich family, and he's not being treated right as a son. And it's clear as day. It's just right in your face. And I think that's really cool to see the differences between the two characters and how Anya and Damien are similar and not similar at the exact same time. It's definitely what this episode wanted to show. Now, besides that, I do also like how the overall relationship of Damien and Anya is growing. Like, despite, obviously, the reference and memes that will come from this episode with, Damien jumping in front of Anya and taking the dodgeball, that scene is very significant. It shows that Damien isn't selfish. He might imply that he's selfish, he might imply that he's only in it for himself, but in reality, his very actions betray his own mind. He isn't necessarily a bad person, and he, acted before he fought. He went to save Anya, and even though that could have potentially costed him his Stella Bolt, or his Stella award, I don't know why I'm saying Bolt, but, his Stella, to be able to actually get an award and noticed by his father, he was willing to throw that away. Even if he didn't think too hard on it, he was willing to throw that away to be able to protect Anya, and that really shows a lot about his character. I think you could find out a lot about a person if their actions speak louder than their words, or, if they act before they think. You get to really see what their body is willing to do, or what they're willing to do as a person, if, they're willing to go that far. And I appreciate that moment. It really dives a lot into Damien's character, and I think this episode did a good job with really establishing him a lot further than we already had to this very point. Now, speaking of Anya, let's talk about her. So Anya, as well, in this episode, is very, very, I guess, good. Like, she is able to dodge the balls that were flying at her and all that because of her mind-reading ability, but also thanks to the training from Yor. And I think the entire training montage we got throughout this episode was really nice, because we get, once again, another interaction of Anya and Yor working together and trying to better her, because it's not just Lloyd trying to train Anya, or Lloyd trying to help out Anya, excel in school, it's Yor as well. And I think that's a great segment, too. It's a great moment to show, once again, both parents are doing everything they can to give their best abilities to their child to allow them to excel in life. And you can see that. Even though, obviously, the advice that Yor is trying to give Anya and the training wasn't the best in terms of what Anya needed in that moment, at the very least, that bonding moment happened, and it shows just how much Yor really does care about Anya, which, once again, is a correlation to Damien and just how he's being trained or treated in his family. So it's just a great scene. I love that little montage of and seeing Anya being able to display some of her skills throughout the episode. But the way she messes up her killer move and slams the ball down and then gets knocked out, that was funny. Like, yo, that was great. That was legitimately funny. But, okay, so I guess we need to talk about the elephant in the room, and that is literally this character right here, this very masculine, JoJo-looking character. And obviously, he's the same age and the same grade as apparently Anya and Damien, but when you look at him, he literally looks straight out of JoJo. And I want to point out that despite the memes and the funniness from the character, etc., there is some symbolism with him that definitely needs to be pointed out. Like, you see throughout this episode, Damian and Anya, they're fighting to reach the stars, to catch the star, to get the Stella, and that's what their objective is. And then you see, this character introduced, this big buff JoJo-looking character introduced, and we see a brief flashback sequence of the father, and how the father's like, hey, you need to achieve the stars, be really strong, etc., and he puts, like, the ball in front of the light, which kind of looks like an eclipse. It looks like, he's literally blocking out the sun, the light, the star, etc., and I think this is very powerful and very important as well, because it shows that he is blocking the path for others to reach the stars, but also he's someone that will potentially be maybe darkness in some people's lives, depending on what side you're actually on, and I think that's also a good way to really give characterization to such a minor character throughout the episode. So yeah, straight up, a very good, well-executed episode of Spy Family. Had a lot of jokes, a lot of memes, a lot of references. It had, a good character development and characterization. Seriously, what is not to love with this week's episode of Spy Family? Easily one of my favorite episodes to date. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed my content, as always, please subscribe, leave a like. It does help me out a lot. And with that, guys, be safe, stay healthy. Chibi out.